Hi, welcome to the Reluctant Ranch Hand. Today I am making homemade pretzel bun rolls. It's cold and rainy and I want to make some of these rolls to go with some ham and bean soup that I pulled out of the freezer. Pretzel bun rolls are delicious and they're actually really easy to make. And all you need to do this, the basic ingredients are 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I have 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, and I've already mixed them up here with my dough hook. And I would recommend using a KitchenAid with a dough hook and let the KitchenAid do the work for you. I have 1.5 cups of warm water with 1 packet of active dry yeast. If you're like me and I buy yeast, large amounts of yeast in jars, 1 packet equals 2.5 teaspoons. So I have 2.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast in warm water, 1.5 cups of warm water, about 100 degrees. I also added 2 teaspoons of sugar in here. So what we're going to do is turn this on low. We're going to add our yeast that's bloomed about 10 minutes. And I recommend letting your yeast sit more than 5 minutes. So that's 10 minutes of it activating in the warm water. And I'm also going to add the butter here in a second once this gets a little incorporated. We'll start adding all of our wet ingredients in there. And we're going to let this mix for between 7 to 10 minutes, depending on how quickly this gets incorporated together. And you'll notice how nice the sides are starting to get really clean. And that really, what that indicates is you've measured correctly the 4.5 cups of flour to the 1.5 cups of water. So when you do that correctly and measure really well, you shouldn't have a dough that's either too dry or too wet. So I had my dough mixing actually at a medium speed. I just turned it down so you can hear me better for 7 minutes. And you can see how clean the sides of the bowl are. And again, that means that it's not too wet, not too dry, it's perfect. If you end up having a dough that's too wet, for an example, what you will need to do is 1 tablespoon at a time add 1 tablespoon of flour. And you just add in incremental amounts because it can go from one extreme to the next really quickly. So if your dough was too dry, I may add a 1/2 tablespoon of water and just to see if I can get it evened out. So this actually looks really good. I'm going to let it go the full 10 minutes and I'm going to turn my speed back up to medium and finish letting the dough do its magic. Now the dough is done. It's got an interesting texture because of the butter we added, but what you want to do is get it into a small round shape, and you want to get it ready to put in. I use a glass bowl, and you really want to coat your bowl with olive oil. I feel like olive oil, it's really expensive, so one of the tricks I do is I always use a can of olive oil spray. It does the same job and it's not as expensive, and the olive oil is just the same. So now that I have my bowl really coated well, what I'm going to do is actually just get it in there, and I'm going to take my olive oil spray and just spray the top a little bit because you don't want it to stick to the saran wrap we're going to put over here. And I'm going to get this thing sealed really good, and we want to let our dough rest for 1.5 hours. And if you have a hard surface like this, like granite, I recommend putting it on a cutting board because typically the stone islands and counters have a cooler temperature. So if you have a cool, dry place to put your bowl, please do that. And we'll let this rise 1.5 hours, and this should actually fill the whole bowl in the next 1.5 hours. And rising times vary depending on temperature, humidity. So every time is different in my opinion. So we're gonna start at 1.5 hours and check our dough. Our dough has rested almost 1.5 hours, and you can see how mine's actually touching the top. So this is where it needs to get. And I'm gonna take off the saran wrap. We don't need that anymore. And then you're gonna punch this down, which is the best part. And I'm actually gonna sprinkle some flour here and get a nice floured surface going, because I'm gonna press this into a rectangular shape, and I'm not gonna use a rolling pin. There's no need to do that. This recipe will make 8 pretzel buns, and they're pretty big by the time they rise the second time, and we actually get to boil them in water with some baking soda. So just forming it with your hands, that's all you need to do. I'm actually get a little more flour on top. Perfect. Because there's still a lot of olive oil on this, so I want to get some of that absorbed. There we go. Perfect. And get this into a relatively even rectangle, because I want to cut out 8 pieces, because we're going to roll them into dough balls and let them rest a second time. And I want to make sure that we're able to get 8 somewhat even sizes out of here. And that looks pretty good. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I think we can make this work. And I'm just giving it a little stretch here at the corners, so we're able to do this. And before you start making your balls, I would get 2 baking pans like this, and I each put a parchment paper in each of them, because these are going to rise and get really big. You need 2 pans to do it. So what I like to use, I use a little dough cutter. This thing is awesome to cut shapes of your dough. So 2, 4, perfect, 6 and 8. Okay, well, this is why measuring can sometimes be hard, so I'm actually going to go a little this way. There's 2 right here. We'll cut those in half. There's 2 here. We'll cut those in half. There's 2, and then what I'm going to do is take some of this edge off here and add it to the first one on the left, because it's a little short. And this is the beauty of making dough work. So yeah, this is perfect. So let's cut right there. Perfect. And what you really want to do is just roll these into a nice shape and make sure they get tucked in underneath, so it's a nice perfectly round ball here. And we're going to let this rise. And sometimes what I do is make sure it's just tucked under there really good. Give it a little roll. So that looks pretty good. And do the same thing here. And really what I try to do is get all these ends underneath, so you can have a perfectly round shape. And again, they don't have to be perfect, but you do want to get them tucked under really well. And you want them relatively the same size, so they cook and bake evenly. And again, we're going to put these in some boiling water with baking soda, and that gives them that chewy inside and the texture on the outside as well. Okay, let's make sure. There we go. So I'm just taking all my ends here, pinching them underneath. Get that underneath there as well. And the second rise will be 45 minutes to an hour, again, depending on temperature and humidity at your house. But I would actually start take a look at them at the 30-minute mark and see if they've doubled in size, because that's where you want to get. This one's going to be a pretty big one, so I'm going to take a little bit off of this one, add it to over here, because this is a little thin. Yeah, this one's going to be a pretty hefty pretzel bun, but they're so yummy, and it's perfect on a cold day with a hot bowl of soup and a salad, and that's exactly what we're doing for dinner. I made some ham and bean soup when my tomatoes, using some of my tomatoes from my greenhouse about a month ago, and ham and bean soup, it freezes so nicely, and I love cooking in bulk with it because I can just pull a bag out, defrost it, and have it for dinner, and just have to make, for tonight, I'm just gonna make a quick salad and make these pretzel buns. And again, these don't take that long to make. I mean, the rise time is included, but the rise time you don't have to do anything. So it takes 10 minutes in a KitchenAid mixer to get all the dough put together. Yeah, these are super easy. I don't think people realize how easy it is to make dough and get comfortable with it. All right, this one looks really good. So this is our 5th one. Perfect. And now I'll show you guys what I do with these ones where I add pieces to it to thicken it up. So really, again, we're just gonna take the edges, make sure the edges are all underneath. Perfect. Get this one a little roll. There we go. There's always one roll in the batch of 8 that I struggle with, and this happens to be this one. But they eat all the same. There's always one problem child in the bunch, but there we go. That's looking better. And we just got 2 more to make. And people ask me what type of flour I use. First of all, I use all-purpose flour, but living in Montana, I only use wheat Montana flour. I love the fact that I use flour that's grown down the road from us, and there's something truly special about knowing where your food comes from. And what I love about wheat Montana, I can get a 50-pound sack of flour of it from my local grocery store, Town and Country. They order for me all the time because I actually go through a 50-pound bag of flour. And I seldomly use bread flour. All-purpose flour works just fine. And I only use bread flour for homemade pizza dough. That is the only time I've ever used bread flour. So all-purpose flour works great, and I love using wheat Montana. So this one's almost done. This one's going to be a bigger one as well, so let me try to add to my little problem child dough ball and see if I can add another piece to it. It's almost like a Frankenstein dough ball. Okay, so let's see if we can add this in here. Stretch it out a little bit. There we go. There we go. So we're gonna let these rest again and cover them. I just use a dish towel to cover mine the second rise. And we're gonna let these rise for 45 minutes to an hour. But again, if your house is a little warmer, you may want to start checking at the half-an-hour mark. And while these are rising, I would preheat your oven to 425 and then get a big pot and fill it halfway, because we're going to actually boil water and we're going to add a half a cup of baking soda to it. And I'll show you guys how to do that, because you got to be very careful with the baking soda. It's kind of like a science experiment. And we'll be back here in an hour. We're ready now for the second part to make our pretzel bun rolls. What you're going to need, I have about 10 cups of water that's simmering in a large pot. You're gonna need a half a cup of baking soda. You're gonna need an egg wash, which is just one egg, a splash of water that's been beaten, and a pastry brush, a paring knife, and I have some coarse Himalayan salt here. If you have coarse kosher salt, that's fine. Rock salt, that'll work as well. But we're gonna use all of these things in the next steps here. So to get pretzel buns, that shiny outside texture and the chewy insides, this is why we need the simmering water and the baking soda. We're gonna poach our dough about 45 seconds on each side for all 8 of our dough balls here. And when you add your baking soda, please be careful because it can bubble. So you can hear the fizz it makes. So I'm just doing this slowly, getting it all in there. And this is what's going to give the pretzel buns its great texture. And that's why we're going to use the slotted spoon to gently put these in. And I try to do 4 at a time. In this part of the process, this is like the fastest part. You got to work pretty fast. We'll get all those in and let them do their thing. And make sure your oven's preheated to 425 too. Don't forget to do that. So you can see that the water's not boiling, it's just simmering because the baking soda is activated with the water. And I can't wait because this is how these pretzel buns get this amazing texture and chewiness, just like a pretzel. And you could also, I'm using these for soup. You can actually use these for burgers as well if you wanted to make homemade pretzel bun burger. You know, these would go nice with a burger. So that's been about 45 seconds. We'll flip them over. And slotted spoons work best because we want to get all the water drained off of these when we put them back on our sheet. There we go. And I know they kind of look a little scary, but this is what they're supposed to look like. But giving them a nice gentle poach. Yeah, these look really good. I'm just going to turn them right side up so when I pick them up, it's just easier. There we go, perfect. Whoops. Again, try to shake off as much water as you can. And don't forget to have parchment paper because that'll help with this. And you can see how big these get. That's why I only put 4 on a tray because they get so big. Perfect. And we'll do the next 4 in a second. And again, like I said, this is a pretty crazy process, so I try to do everything at once as I can. So you want to make sure these are really coated well with this egg wash because this is what's going to give it this shiny dark brown texture because you want these to cook and they're going to actually get dark brown. They're not going to get burnt, but they're going to get really, really dark brown. And I want to make sure I get all the good parts coated here. And then we'll do the same thing with the other 4. So these are going to be so yummy. Okay, perfect. And then I'm going to do my little sprinkle of salt. And I'm pretty generous with the salt. These are pretzel buns. They'll always have lots of salt on. And I like these because these have some pink and white and all different color salt here. Okay, perfect. Next, we're going to use the paring knife, and you want to do a crisscross pattern, and make sure you cut through and make sure your knife is sharp. The crisscross pattern, what this will allow is the bread to expand while these are baking in the oven. And making sure your knife is sharp is really important so you can actually penetrate through the dough. These are good. Maybe make this one a little longer. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna get this one out of the way. And we'll repeat the same process with the last set of 4 here. So we'll start poaching these guys. And I try to keep them all the same way so I remember which side they were on when I put them in, so I know which side to flip. Perfect. So we'll give these about 45 seconds. And make sure your water's not boiling, just simmering like this. This is perfect temperature to poach the dough. These are looking good. We'll flip them over. And I wouldn't recommend doing this without a slotted spoon. You want to make sure there's as little as moisture as possible on the bottoms, because you don't want the bottoms to be soggy when they are baking in the oven. They kind of look like brains, but I trust me, these are going to taste really delicious. I promise you. So I'm going to flip these all over. Perfect. Shake them out a little bit. Some of these got really big. Okay. Okay, there we go. And the last one. Shut off the oven. There we go. Okay. So now we'll get our egg wash and coat these really well like we did the first batch. And you can tell if you miss a spot because they won't have the dark brown coloring. I want to give this some room between these two. Perfect. Make sure we get these all coated. And after you get this done, get the coating on, the salt, the crisscross pattern, we're going to put them in the oven at 425, and these are going to bake 15 to 20 minutes. Everyone's oven's different, so mine usually take the full 20. So I set a timer for 15. I take a look at them, and then I usually set the timer again for another 3 to 5 minutes. Let's get our great rock salt here. Get that off. And my cat has something to say about pretzel buns. There we go. Make sure these all have enough salt on them. Can't go wrong with salt. Okay, perfect. And we'll do our crisscross pattern. So it's pretty easy to do pretzel buns. Like I said, during the rise times, you can get other stuff done, and there's very little cleanup involved in this. I just have to wash out this pot. I cleaned out my KitchenAid a while ago, and we'll get these put in the oven, and we'll see you on the other side. I pulled out my pretzel buns at 20 minutes, and you want to put them on a rack to cool, so they cool from underneath as well. They turned out beautiful. They have the beautiful brown texture and color, and I have my ham and bean soup that I heated up, and I'm gonna have bread and soup for dinner plus a little salad. So thank you for listening in. You can subscribe to my videos as well on YouTube under Reluctant Ranch Hand if you prefer YouTube. and thanks for watching.